Jackass, Best and Last is a reality slapstick comedy film, came out this past year, and is the subject of this episode of Neon Crew Reviews. Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Kyle. This is the second installment of this show, and today we are going to be talking about quite the different type of movie compared to last week. Last week we discussed Evil Dead Burn, a new horror film in the Evil Dead franchise. This time we are discussing another later entry, newer release in a long-running series of films, a franchise in its own right, but quite the different type of thing. And I am still working in my head as to how to navigate this discussion, how to talk about a film like this in the Jackass series of films. And I want to start by saying I like the Jackass movies. I am not the biggest fan. Not that I hate any of them in particular. In fact, I think most of them I view with some level of fondness. You know, I don't think there's like a significantly weak entry in the Jackass franchise. That is until maybe we get to this newest one, but we'll talk about that. But I have like very little animosity or, grievances when it comes to the Jackass movies. These are almost begging to be approached in a different type of way than you would a normal movie, a normal comedy movie, a documentary, I guess you could say. This is obviously a series that has gone on for quite a while, probably nearly, 3 decades at this point, if you encompass the TV show with the first movie and then the rest of the films to follow it, not even including the show with Bam Margera or the Steve-O Chris Pontius thing. Can't remember the specific titles of those right now, but regardless, it's been around for a while. They've become synonymous with gross out gags and stunt work and just kind of borderline mean-spirited pranks captured on camera and edited together for the world to see, with not really much of a cohesive through line for most, if not all, of these films. And they just kind of exist in their own playing field. It's its own thing. It's almost impossible to emulate this while trying to reach the level of success that Jackass has. There's been different kinds of versions of this sort of thing that have come and gone, and Jackass as a brand has still endured through the trials of time. And it's fascinating. There's characters in it. There's arcs, obviously, and I want to talk about them. But, my overall thoughts on Jackass Best and Last is that it was okay. I saw this in theaters with my buddy Drew. A lot like the last movie that I talked about on here, Evil Dead Burn. I'm going to keep bringing it up, I guess. But it was not by any means a sold-out crowd. It was nearly the opposite. It was me, my buddy Drew, and maybe 3 people behind us and then 2 people towards the front. We like to orient ourselves towards the middle of the theater. And it was a fun time. We had some goofs and gaffes. We watched the stunts, we watched the pranks, the grossness of it, and just kind of cringed and laughed at what was happening. But I think the lack of presence of people, just like the emptiness of the theater, really didn't help the experience. It feels like the type of movie you want to see with a huge crowd. I saw Jackass Forever, the previous entry in this franchise, in the theater as well, and it was almost a similar sort of thing. There are a few more people there than this time around. It feels like general interest with this one seems to be a little bit less, especially after they kind of made the promise, even in Forever, that it was going to be the last one that they did. We can talk about that later. I just feel like if there is not much of a crowd to go see this movie with, then it kind of falls a little bit flat, right? It's very experiential that way. It is like some of those movies that kind of hinge on audience participation and engagement, sort of like a horror movie or any other type of comedy. You go see a comedy in a theater and it might be very funny. It might be one of the most cleverly written, well-timed things, and the audience for it can, I think, make or break an experience like that. And I feel like it's very similar with Jackass as a franchise. But my own personal history with this, I actually don't really remember if I've seen the first one. I know I haven't seen the TV show. I think it was just a little bit before my time coming up. And they were movies that even as a high schooler, I was kind of put off by. You know, I wasn't really venturing out into the world of gross out gags and just mean-spirited humor and, you know, the type of stuff that Jackass is pretty much the embodiment of. But I think it was during the pandemic or maybe even shortly before that, we had watched 2, 2.5, 3, and then 3.5 at home. My buddy Gideon and I, when I lived with him. And that was my big exposure to the franchise. I think I had maybe seen 2 or 3 on its own. Maybe it was playing in syndication on TV. Obviously, they had to censor a bunch of shit. But we were able to like just kind of fully dive into the franchise at that point. I think for some reason we didn't watch 1 just because there was like a perception of it being like kind of before it got into its stride with 2 and 3. But regardless, I'll probably check it out eventually one of these days. You know, maybe when Megan's not in the house, because this is definitely not her type of franchise. But I've always enjoyed it. I've always had fun with it. There are obviously my preferred types of stunt work and things that they do in these movies as opposed to others, and we can get to that. But, you know, I generally view 2 and 3 and the half entries with a certain amount of joy and just appreciation. You know, there's, like I said before, there's not much quite like Jackass, and the chemistry that the cast members have with each other, I'm going to call them cast members because they're, you know, they're cast in the movie essentially. I think that the genuine relationships that they have or seem to have is interesting. You know, everybody has kind of like their own favorite or their least favorite member of the Jackass crew. They each kind of serve slightly different purposes from one another, but they mesh together well, especially in 2 and 3. And I think that it is maybe one of the stronger parts of those movies is just the dynamic that they have with each other, this kind of like frat bro energy where they're just constantly fucking with each other. You know, they're pranking each other and hitting each other in the dick and all this stuff. And it's very kind of surface level fun, but it's surface level fun that feels lived in. Like these guys have been hanging out for years and we're just now starting to see the progression of that sort of crescendo into the absolute madness of some of the stunts that they do. And I don't know, I think it's fun to see. I think there's obviously the factor of we're going to see how much we can take, and us as an audience member are going to see how much we can take watching them. You know, the whole appeal of Jackass, in my opinion, is, you know, the kind of train wreck aspect of I hate what I'm seeing, but I can't look away. And part of that has to do with the stunts. A lot of it has to do with really gross, you know, things involving piss and shit, semen, whatever other body fluid you can think of. And being able to say, oh, I made it through this clip. I made it through the part where we see literal poop come out of a volcano after someone had copious amounts of laxatives. And I'm just going to kind of lay it out here right now. I'm someone who vastly prefers the stunt work, you know, stuff involving ramps or bulls or rockets, someone getting hit in the face with a giant fucking hand, you know, someone skateboarding through an obstacle course. That stuff is my bread and butter. Watching them get hurt from the stupid situations that these people put themselves in is, in my opinion, peak Jackass. The gross stuff, I think, does have value. I think that it serves the brand and the kind of mean-spirited nature of the show and the movies itself. It is not my favorite. Obviously, we don't like to see gross things, but in that sort of factor, it can be engrossing. Forgive the slight pun, but it is, I think, a little bit disproportional in terms of some of the other stuff that I want to see. Now, this is totally, and I acknowledge this, a personal preference of mine. And everybody has their own different expectations and tastes when it comes to what they want out of Jackass. You know, you can meet somebody who's like, yeah, I wish it was all gross shit. I wish it was all just like a bunch of poop and pee and all this garbage. And that's totally fine. That's well and good. It is absolutely not my favorite, and I lean more towards the stunt work. And you know, I appreciate some of the more kind of clever stuff that they set up. I mean, you literally get, it's sort of like Final Destination 1, and it's a weird comparison, but I'm going to make it, in that Final Destination 1 will sometimes have like the most elaborate setups for someone to get killed. You know, someone like trips on a wheel and then they fall on a fish hook, and you know, the bathwater starts going, but then like the toaster's right there and it like Rube Goldbergs itself into someone's demise. And then there'll literally be another scene where a girl gets hit by a bus, and that's it. And it's sort of the same with Jackass, where they will have like the most complicated setup for a stunt. Like in this newest one, for example, they put, you know, a couple of them in like these couple different rooms in the dark, thinking that there's a snake in there, but there's not. And they set up all these elaborate things. They get hit by some of the people in the room. They run into shit. There's like frying pans hanging from the ceiling. There's like mouse traps and shit everywhere. And then you will literally get a clip, the actual next moment in the movie, the next beat of like just someone getting hit in the dick. And that's it. And it like begins and ends there. And I don't know, there's something kind of respectable and lovely about just the collage nature of the Jackass movies. Now, I want to talk about this one specifically because I believe that this, at least in terms of the ones that I've seen, is maybe the weakest entry in the Jackass lineup of movies. And if you've seen this movie, you can kind of see where I'm going in that I appreciate a lot of what this movie's doing. Obviously, it is trying to build itself up as the last entry in the movie franchise, you know, especially with the old cast of characters that we're used to. I mean, a lot of these guys are in their 40s. Some of them are pushing 50. And, you know, it is a significant sort of point in this movie's existence. I feel as though this one falls kind of short, especially compared to Jackass Forever, a movie that I enjoy. I didn't absolutely love it, but I thought it was a decent send-off, and introduces like the new cast members in a way that was like kind of interesting and fascinating. I feel like this next one kind of falls short, best and last. I feel like it falls a little bit short of the kind of impact they were hoping it would have, not just in terms of the sentiment that this was going to be the last one, but also just in terms of the stunts themselves and like the new stuff that they do. A lot of this movie is intercut with old footage and clips that we've seen before from the previous 3 movies and some of the TV show. And you know, some of it obviously is like old clips that we have never seen before, like Johnny Knoxville shooting himself in the chest. That's something that the movie offers to us, is like, hey, this is something that we dug up. But a lot of it, too, is stuff that we have seen before. You know, like Bam getting hit with the giant hand after, you know, Wee Man says, hey, high five, man. And he gets fucking plastered with the thing. Or I think they include the snake ball pits. There's, you know, various clips of like old Steve-O doing stuff from Jackass 2 when he's all like drugged out of his mind. And it's like, this stuff is interesting and I like revisiting it. It almost feels too much like when the season finale of a, you know, narrative TV show starts becoming a clip show. And it's like, oh, the best moments of fucking Seinfeld or whatever. And it just doesn't really resonate the same way that Jackass Forever did as a supposed final entry in the franchise. Obviously, this is completely like one of the most unserious things ever. This is Jackass we're talking about. But I think there's something worth pointing out, that it doesn't really feel like the new cast in this one has as much of an impact as they did in the previous one. For example, Rachel Wolfson is like barely featured in this at all. You get some stuff with Poopies, you get some stuff with Zach and Jasper and, you know, all of them, but it it really just kind of feels like they're just included because, hey, we were in the last one and we get to be in this one. And they're almost sort of treated as like an afterthought in a lot of ways. And really, it just makes this feel a little bit too disjointed. There's like a debate going on the authenticity of like some of the kind of primal fears that the cast members have. So for example, they do one with Bam. This is like one of the newer ones that they did with Bam, I think either during Forever or maybe this one, where they put him in a room and it's dark and they make him think that there's snakes in the room. And it's fun. It's interesting to see. It's certainly interesting to see Bam in that setting, like, in a contemporary Jackass sense. There is the question of, is he overreacting and selling it up to the camera so that they can make it a quintessential Jackass moment? And I don't know, some of it rings authentic, some of it does not. And it's just something that I kind of wrestle with the fact that this is supposedly the last entry and that these guys are just old as shit and their bodies are just, breaking with every second they do this crap. So I went over the plot of Evil Dead Burn in the last one, and there's not a plot, there's not a synopsis to go by with, Jackass. I guess I can talk about some of the more interesting stunt work that they do. So the movie opens up with Johnny Knoxville from the TV show days, so like really young Johnny Knoxville just shooting himself in the chest with a gun. He's got a bulletproof vest, and also there are like magazines that are lined up so that it absorbs the bullet and doesn't actually hit him or penetrate him. And it's interesting, and it's like one of the kind of more hooky parts that a Jackass movie I think has had in a long time. But nothing after that really kind of hits to the level that opening stunt does. I feel like it would have been better served if they had maybe saved that towards the end, really kind of like cap off like, yeah, this is like kind of where it all began. And they sprinkle some other things throughout, like the one where he pretends to be a convict and he's in a hardware store trying to escape, and then the police pull up and they're like, oh, this clip is MTV was banned from filming in this area for 10 years and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's cool. And I like seeing it and it's interesting, but really doesn't have the same impact as the gun one did in the beginning. There's other stuff that I think was kind of fun. Some stuff that I thought was lame. The one where Zach is just like kind of hanging above a chair and they have to answer trivia questions, otherwise he gets lowered onto them, was like a neat concept, but I don't know how interesting it was to watch as an audience member. It wasn't quite to the caliber of some of the stuff that we've seen before involving like Preston Lacey or like other similar stunt work. I appreciated the as gross as it was. I appreciated the laxative Twister game that they played, where they just take extreme laxatives and play Twister, and you can just imagine how that plays out, and you're picturing exactly what happens, essentially. Oh, they include some of the stuff with the robot that gives Steve-O a prostate exam, and also is just like present throughout the rest of the movie and some of the stunts. Like, I thought that was kind of funny. It really kind of shows the progression of time with Jackass and like the things that they're able to do a little bit. It does kind of just feel a little cheap and just like, come on guys, really, we're like doing this. There's like no real sense of escalation with it or heightening of one stunt to the other. It sort of feels like it's laying flat the stuff that we liked about Jackass and the stuff that they think that we're going to enjoy, and about half of that stuff I would say hits, and the other half just really doesn't meet the mark. So I kind of want to talk about each individual cast member because, where else is this conversation going to go, right? Johnny Knoxville, I think he's good as the kind of ringleader, the central focus, the guy who sort of the mastermind and the puppet master throughout all these movies. I think he does a good job giving a genuine screen presence, bravado, this sense of, yeah, I'm the guy at the head of all of this. Steve-O is always fascinating to watch, whether or not he's like drugged out of his mind or he's completely sober but just doing it for the love of the game. quick mention, I saw Steve-O live, and that was quite the unique experience. I got to touch the man and feel his warmth, feel his body warmth, taking a selfie with him. So that was fun. I enjoyed it. Chris Pontius. Now, my friends have expressed that they do not care for Chris Pontius really at all. They think that he is annoying and abrasive and that his humor just doesn't hit. And I kind of agree with it. I also think that in this latest entry, he doesn't really bug me as much as he did in the previous ones. I think that he's one of the few that's actually still like kind of in shape and like keeps up with his own health. So he's one of the few that looks relatively good for how old he is at this point. But I don't know. He does what he does. He comes in, he gets the job done. You know, he's an active member and he's been with them for a long time. So like really, at this point, it'd be sort of like almost like a Bam Margera thing of it's a little weird that this guy isn't a part of it anymore, and I feel like you would feel like a little bit of absence from him if he wasn't there. And you know, it seems like he's always down and willing to do whatever. Wee Man, Preston Lacey, those two guys I feel go hand in hand because they function similar in that they're the opposite type. You know, Preston being huge, Wee Man being little. They're often paired together in terms of stunts because, haha, big man fall on small man, or small man get launched by big man. And they're fun. I can't really remember too much of what they do in this newest movie that is unfamiliar, but obviously it wouldn't be the same kind of Jackass without those two. Dave England, to me, maybe is like one of the weaker members of the original crew. To me, doesn't really like leave too much of an impact. I oftentimes forget that he's there. And then you've got Danger Aaron McGeehee. Is that his name? Yeah, Aaron McGeehee. I am very mixed on Aaron because I feel like he gets a lot of the worst type of stuff that they do, you know, with like the pogo stick and like the hockey hitting his dick and the bear trap, obviously, him getting shocked. And of course, most notably, I think it was at the end of the second Jackass where he dresses as a Islamic terrorist and a cab driver beats the fuck out of him. I think there's a lot of iconic moments from Jackass because of Aaron and his willingness to participate and kind of be the punching bag of the group. But at the same time, I feel like there's maybe a reason why he's the punching bag of the group. It's just like his presence, just there's like a grating quality to him that you kind of want to see executed in a way that's like, yeah, I want to see this guy get hit in the face or like launched somewhere or like put through like the fucking ringer, you know. So in a sense, you really can't have a lot of Jackass moments without Aaron in it, but it is telling that he is the punching bag when, you know, he just kind of seems to naturally fit that status. I'm not going to talk too much about the newer crew. Poopies, I thought his lip injection thing was kind of funny. Zach, it seems to be the same sort of shtick with Preston Lacey. Zach kind of concerns me with how huge he is. It's like concerning. And I hope that he takes care of himself in the future here. Jasper and Rachel Wolfson, they really didn't leave too much of an impression in this one to me. I like the moment where Jasper gets rammed by the ram in like the office party setting over and over again. I thought that was fun. Rachel Wolfson doesn't have fuck all to do in this. She's just there. She's just like reacting to the things that are happening for the most part. It doesn't really feel too participatory. And I just wonder how much of that was sort of hesitation from the Jackass crew part of, we don't want to show a woman going through this same stuff because maybe it comes across as like too mean-spirited and sexist. And it almost feels sexist in the fact that they don't include her or clips of her at all really in this doing anything of note. Really the only moment that I can think of is like her tongue getting shocked in the intro scene, which the intro scene is fun. I like the kind of I Need a Hero music going with the setting, the kind of like crisscross. Is it crisscross? I don't remember. The like kind of music video where like the house is moving, but like it looks like they're sliding on the floor, like that type of thing. I thought that was fun. That was like a cool intro. That was mesmerizing. If I had to pick a favorite member, I guess I would pick Steve-O, because he's the one that I've met in real life, and he's the one that I think has the most interesting narrative arc of all the Jackass movies. Obviously, I haven't touched on Bam Margera. Obviously, Bam, essential part of the Jackass crew from the first movie to the third movie, not included in Forever, and of course, like, he's sprinkled in this film through either archive footage or like one newer stunts that they did during Forever. And just one of those guys where it seems like he has a litany of issues stemming from Ryan Dunn's passing, but it seemed like there was maybe something there even from before that, with like substance abuse problems and like other similar stuff that Steve-O went through but then became clean. So I don't know. Hopefully he like gets his shit together. His parents seem lovely. Don't know how they produced a kid like that, but you know, maybe we'll see how that unfolds in the future. And then of course Ryan Dunn. I think they replayed the X-ray stunt where he shoves a car up his ass and goes and gets it X-rayed, and I thought that was funny. He's obviously like got some shining moments. He was a part of the crew. You know, rest in peace, Ryan Dunn. A lot of these later movies are kind of like built off of him and his legacy. So, you know, unavoidable in discussing the Jackass films when it comes to Ryan Dunn. And that is pretty much Jackass Forever. Thank you guys so much for listening to me spiel about Jackass Forever for some reason. I don't know why. And now I'm going to talk about what I watched this week. So I guess that's going to be the name of the segment for the time being. I didn't even come up with a new name for it, even from the previous episode. So we're just gonna head right into it. Not too much that I've been able to catch this week. I did watch Evil Dead Rise, the entry that came before Evil Dead Burn. So I watched that on the 22nd. I had a lot of fun with it. I think as far as like actual scares, I thought that Evil Dead Rise had maybe some of the best scares I've seen in terms of the performance from, I'm going to pull her name up right now, Alyssa Sutherland as Ellie. I thought that she was phenomenal. I get the hype. I get why people argue that she might be one of the better performances in not just that movie, but the entire franchise. And I thought it was a lot of fun. I liked the setting. I liked the sort of whole like apartment, high-rise type of deal that it was going. This sort of dank environment that's really darkly lit and has a lot of spooky stuff going on. This kind of like punk air about it I thought was really fun and cool. In terms of the actual characters in it, I felt kind of similarly to it the way I did with Evil Dead Burn, in that I wasn't particularly attached to that many of them, or really any of them at all. I thought that the relationship dynamics and the characterizations of them were like fun, but not too in-depth to the point where it really drew me into one specific person. And the themes, again, very similar to Burn in this way, in that they are in there and they are attempted to be touched on in a way that feels like they have more weight behind them than they actually do with the story of what's going on with Ellie becoming a Deadite, and you know, that manifesting itself throughout in a way that highlights the kind of the themes of what's going on. So, you know, similar to Burn in that way, and that pretty surface level and forgettable. I gave that one a 7 out of 10. I thought it was fun. I'll happily rewatch it on an Evil Dead marathon. And I look forward to seeing more performances from Alyssa Sutherland if they get her back. You know, there was that teaser at the end of Evil Dead Burn, so we'll see how that plays out. I also watched Troy on the 23rd. After I saw The Odyssey, I was very curious. There was a lot of conversation bubbling up about Troy, the Brad Pitt vehicle. Came out in 2004, sort of off the back of the success of Gladiator, you know, swords and sandals. Shit was selling hot at the box office. And I watched it with the kind of like new revival, this reverence that it's been getting post-Odyssey, of just like the depictions of like some of the characters in mythology and like the performances. And I thought it was boring as shit. I honestly thought that this movie was pretty lame. It was horribly paced. The acting was not good. I don't think there was a good performance in this. Brad Pitt feels like he's just lost at sea. And the actual editing and beats of this movie are so fucking repetitive that it does not serve the pacing of this thing at all. Some of the fights are kind of interesting in terms of a special effects standpoint. Some of it feels a little goopy with like the CGI crowds running at each other, very kind of like Chronicles of Narnia that way. But again, this one really didn't resonate with me in the way I was hoping, especially with the way people were talking about this movie. There's like almost like a prequel Star Wars-esque kind of discourse about this film post Odyssey, where they're like, oh, we have a new appreciation for Troy now, and they were doing this and that and blah blah blah, and it's like, it's just kind of lame. I don't know what this is. Where's this coming from? Like, I would love to be pointed in a specific direction to see why this movie is getting this like newfound reverence, when I just thought it was just kind of lame. So 4 out of 10 for Troy. I'm sorry to the Troy boys out there who soy for this film, but it was absolutely not for me. The next film after that I watched on the 25th, Jackass Best and Last. Already discussed that in detail. And then this last one I watched, Enter the Void, Gaspar Noé's 2009 film Enter the Void, which we will be discussing on the Neon Crew podcast when that episode comes out. Speaking of which, I have a little bit of news in regards to that. So the episode covering both the Odyssey and Enter the Void is going to be delayed. I'll make a post about it. You'll see it on social media, I'm sure, either before or after this episode comes out. But Mac has a very busy schedule ahead of him. He's got his coaching. He's going to have to stay late. And so that means this week we won't be able to get to record that. So that has been pushed to next week. So hopefully, not this coming Sunday from when this episode comes out, but the Sunday after, you will see our episode on the Odyssey and Enter the Void drop in your feed. And hopefully we'll have a good discussion about that. I'm excited to. This will give me a chance to hopefully read some of the Odyssey before we record, because I wanted to anyway, and this kind of gives me the perfect excuse and the amount of time to dive into it the way I want to. So we'll see how that goes. But I appreciate you guys listening to this episode of Neon Crew Reviews. Stay tuned for another one in the next week, hopefully. My goal is to check out Her Private Hell before it leaves theaters, but not sure how possible that's going to be. A little bit busy this week with family in town and just kind of doing activities with them. I was actually kind of surprised I was able to squeeze this in. So look forward to something on the feed, whether it be that movie or something else. But until next time, this is Kyle, signing off. Bye-bye.